Excuse me, I'll apologize in advance for any coughing. The cold is still lingering. I feel fine, but every now and then it goes into left field. I'd like to just start by wishing Ken Carpenter a happy birthday. He's on, but had blacked himself out there. So, Ken, I'm glad you got the snow that I sent you, and hope you enjoy it. Uh, was posted yesterday about he enjoyed the snow. Some anonymous donor sent him. So of course I had to take credit for it because we don't want it here in LA, so we shipped it to him. So like this week again, going to pick up with publicity photos, as I said, from N through W, and there's no X, Y, or Z pavilions that I could think of. And I got through the first batch of them about 12:30 this morning, to scan the last of them. So I didn't get to the next batch, which probably do next week, which has a lot of the concept art and some of the other stuff. But let me start here with one that we saw last week that I just wanted to bring back up. Okay, folks can see it. We saw this last week. It's the Mormon Pavilion, and I thought we would take some of our armchair detectives and look at here on the backside. Mentions the sculptor of this thing, right here, Elbert Porter, and the statue that was up at the top of the Mormon Pavilion. I tried to find out where this statue might have gone. I know that the statue that was inside the Pavilion of the Christus is out here in LA, but I could not. I tried searching on Elbert Porter and Angel Maroney, that sort of thing, and I found a number of stories about him building it, and then his obituary mentioned that he had done it, but I didn't find anything about where this might have gone someplace after the fair. So if anybody's able to track down Elbert Porter's statue of the Angel Maroney, I can see Don is already leaping to the.
Yeah, you know me, gotta look.
Yeah, yeah. So, but that's again the nice thing about some of these pictures. You come up with the little factoids that they stick on there, and away you go. So I'll let Don work on that. And as I said, this week we're going to go with the ends, and we start with the New York City Pavilion. Uh, Again, mentioned you can often date the fair by a lot of the things that you see in them. And my first thought is, if we zoom in on here, you could see that this one, they had blacked out where it used to say Dick Button's Ice Extravaganza. So it was sometime after that show had closed, and before they had taken the sign here, Panorama New York City, and they later duplicated it and stuck it over here as well. But poor Dick, he had great intentions, and as I showed in some prior presentations, he had great hopes, but very small audiences. And on the back, it mentions some of the things that are in there. Got a kick here, approximately 122,250 square feet. We're going to see another approximate number that's very interesting, so keep that in mind. I don't remember the new Amsterdam model inside of this. A 9 by 14-inch model doesn't particularly strike me as being a large model. I mean, that's smaller than basically this picture, or about the size of the picture. So I don't remember that model. I don't know if I'd call that out. But obviously the big thing there was the panorama of the city of New York. Next door was its next door neighbor in real life, the New Jersey Pavilion, a whole series of tents with exhibits around life in New Jersey, both historical ones of old cars. One of the things that was super popular was a full-size model of the Telstar satellite. And this pavilion had the unfortunate distinction of being one of the few areas where people were killed in building of the World's Fair, when these cables that were holding up these roofs as during the construction, one of them snapped and a whole section of the thing came crashing down to the ground and killed one of the workers. So, you think that you'd have a pavilion like the New York State Pavilion so high, maybe somebody would fall off it and get killed. And obviously that didn't happen, luckily. But something like this looks fairly innocuous, and turned out not to be. And they mentioned they had a big thing going on all year. I showed in a prior presentation, how they had taken mock-ups of their pavilion and put it in county fairs and that. And then they had a big year-long celebration of their state's anniversary. New Mexico, they had 5 different buildings out there. Inside the exhibit building was the typical historical things you'd see about the founding of the state and the Santa Fe Trail and some of those things. And then you see the Hitching Post restaurant, and as the mentioned back here, what they had, a restaurant featuring foods of the Southwest United States and Mexico. And I think that was probably the first place I had ever had Mexican food. Back at those days, there were no Taco Bells or Del Tacos or anything like that in New York. I don't know where they were. Matter of fact, I think Del Taco was founded in 1964. Every time I go into one, that's on the wrapper of the food. But I remember going into this pavilion, and after you've eaten 100 things at the Brass Rail restaurants, you want to try something else, and they had Mexican food, and that just seemed the most exotic thing in the world at that point in time. NCR Pavilion was a real intellectual engineering marvel. Basically, it had those 3 columns. We can see 2 of them here, and they used steel wires hanging from those columns to hang up the roof of the building. And everybody was oohing and ahhing about what a big thing this was. And if you think about it now, that's exactly the technology they used for the transportation pavilion at the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. So have a structure where you have tremendous amount of interior space inside because you don't have support pillars holding it all up. And all sorts of architectural magazines were, raving about this modern design. And it was the same concept used in 1933. So inside there, as a matter of fact, I never knew until I saw this that their theme was man and his records. All I could think of was going in there was they had this great thing called NCR paper. And if you remember it at that point in time, to make a copy of something, you took a piece of paper, put carbon paper in there, got the carbon on your finger as you typed, and it came out on the other side. Well, NCR paper used micro-encapsulated chemicals that, as you wrote on them, would break the little bubbles on the paper and create a copy of it. And I have all sorts of NCR paper I took home from the fair, and it still has a very unique odor to it. And amazingly, 60 years later, if you take a piece of NCR paper and write on it, it still will make copies, and the little bubbles will still break, and it comes out today. So, but that was real high tech. And you think the only thing I think they found out later on is you can't let that NCR paper get in the sun at all, because that will also break all the bubbles and everything fades away. But for instant receipts and things where you needed a copy of something right away, it sure put the carbon paper business to bed. I mean, when was the last time any of you saw, used, or even saw for sale carbon paper? A nice nighttime view of it with the fountain out front, and you can see they had a multiple story display area, and there's a set of escalators inside going up. That's the fun thing you can do on some of these pictures, is zoom in, and the nighttime shots are nice because during the day the sun glare would keep you from seeing inside. Excuse me. And they mentioned their special space frame construction. So New England states, they had a whole bunch of the states got together and put their own pavilion together, rather than having individual states that got together. And this was the same thing they had done for the 39 fair. And they had these small kiosks. Up until just a few years ago, this pavilion stood in Portland, Maine. They had taken it back, and it was a shopping center. And Carol and I were up in that area and went in, and the tenants had moved out, and the buildings were, I think there were 1 or 2 were still being used, but most of it was empty, and you could look through the windows in this big empty space, and it's since been torn down. But that was repurposed after the fair. Again, the mottos, I don't know if anybody ever paid any attention. New England, where our past began, our future begins. But there was a nice artist model there of what it was going to look like. And they did these for just about all the pavilions to convince the investors on where their money would be going. And model on a 2-acre tract. This one is kind of interesting. I have to get this to a fellow, Bella Knock. I don't know if you've ever seen Bella He's a performer that was with the Ringling Brothers Circus before it closed. He was on uh, uh, America's Got Talent and everything. He's got hair that stands straight up. And Carol and I had seen him when we took the kids to the circus out here, and he does one of these incredible acts on the Wheel of Death and everything. But he's been in touch with me on Facebook, and as I find pictures of his family performing, if you don't remember what the Nerveless Knox did, they were in the the lake amusement area. And their big thing was that these very, very tall poles, they have to have been probably 60, 80 feet tall. And they were not rigid. So they would climb up on these poles, and the poles would be moving back and forth as they move their bodies back and forth. And then when they be going from one pole to the other 60 feet in the air, they would make the transition just like the man on the flying trapeze. They would go from pole to pole, and it was really kind of a amazing event to watch. Real neck cricker as you're looking up there. But I do have a movie I'm looking for. In one of my movies I have, somebody did get some footage of the Nerveless Knox. So they're still performing today, and matter of fact, Bella's daughter, I believe, has gone and taken up the thing. So if you ever get the chance to see any of the Knox perform, it's frightening. A nice scenic area, Oklahoma. They went put this big lake area in, and it looks like in this particular day they were probably encouraging people for the picture to rest their feet. Excuse me. In the background, you can see the USA Pavilion over here, one of the family phone booths. So we end up with all sorts of fun fair icons. And just to grab the back for the number here. This is over at the Pavilion of Paris, and people may or may not know the story. Originally, there was supposed to be a very elaborate pavilion for the France Pavilion. And if you look at artist renderings, it basically was a large dome, like we were talking about earlier about Las Vegas, a big dome, and a sort of a pyramid area next to it. Well, they had built up their artist models and renderings. It was on the official scale model of the fair at the headquarters building for the fair, and everything was going along. And then the BIE, which is based over there, said if anybody participates in the New York Fair, you'll never get your own fair. So all of a sudden, the Pavilion of Paris, Pavilion of France was gone. The space was available, so they put in this pavilion, the Pavilion of Paris. It was really pretty, one of the more lackluster pavilions. Look at the description in a second. But they mentioned here they had an outdoor cafe. I can't remember this at all. I mean, it's one of those things you see in pictures. You wonder if it lasted for any period of time. Cafe Madeleine, and then I think there's another one in here. Yeah, this is another one we'll put the detectives to work on in a second. On my site, I have a thing about how they changed pavilions and things over the years. And the Pavilion of Paris did change a whole bunch. Out in front here for a while, they had flagpoles with the French and the American and the World's Fair flag flying. Then they put in a sculpture, which is mentioned here on the background. Another one I could not find anything of. So if anybody can locate the sculpture, Understanding Lifting the Veil of Prejudice, like I said, I didn't have any luck tracking it down. Upstairs, they mentioned the second floor is an interesting sight to see. It really wasn't. Whoever wrote this was frankly a bald-faced liar.
Yeah,
Upstairs, yeah,
I just
somebody have
laughed.
something? Sorry. Upstairs was an area that was mostly empty. There were a whole bunch of people selling art up there. Not by any name people. You could get your caricature done, that sort of thing. They did a quick thing of trying to have a dance show up there. It didn't work out. So Paris was pretty much it stayed open both years, and they tried the second year to make it a little bit more interesting. Didn't work. After the fair ended, the building was taken down, and I'm trying to remember, it's either in Westchester, New York, or it might have been Connecticut. Anyway, it's still in with us today as a warehouse. So big prefab metal slab building, steel pillars, took it all down, and today it stores something for somebody. The Pennsylvania Pavilion was a 1965 edition. It was raised through private funding by Pennsylvania people who were upset with their state government that they were not at the fair, particularly when the surrounding states were. So they put in this pavilion, which was a fairly economical one to construct, as you can see. But the center piece of it, the main element, was a copy of the Liberty Bell, and it was a part of a process where they had done the copies of the Liberty Bell and made them for all 50 states and sent them out. So one of the duties you got working at the fair as a Boy Scout was to basically guard the Liberty Bell, let people ring it, and hopefully try to answer questions and that. So you can see two of the scouts here and another one over here acting as the host for it. So it worked out really well for Pennsylvania. They finally got their name on the map. In the background, they had a little kiosk where you could get Pennsylvania tourist information, but it cost them next to nothing to operate it because all of us Boy Scouts would volunteer to work at the fair, and that was the job of ringing the bell. They mention it here. They had what you call 100,000 Pennsylvanians. You could check in $1 a piece or $5 or whatever to do it. And it got to be real popular. I remember standing there one day. I must have waited 20 minutes on the line or so just for my chance to ring the Liberty Bell. And one of the big things was people would try to ring it as hard as possible to see they put another crack in it, but it didn't work. Parker Penn, very popular pavilion at the time because they did the very technological thing of matching people up with pen pals from around the world using the computer. So you would go in and fill out a form that, whether you liked reading books or your favorite sport was baseball or you liked chocolate or whatever the questions were, they answered on it. And you would fill it in with, if you remember those little bubbles on a piece of paper, you'd fill in with a pencil and you'd fill in the bubble, and they would always tell you, don't go out of the lines, but fill it in. Then they would take it over, stick it in the computer, and then they would match up with somebody with a similar likes. I think I ended up with a pen pal from Germany. We sent one letter to each other, and then that fell apart. But you still see stories every now and then about people that have been in touch for the last 60 years. And people will occasionally post pictures. Oh, I got together with my pen pal. We do it every 10 years, that sort of thing. But I think today in the day of internet, instant messages and everything, the whole thought of a pen pal is just ancient history. But I do remember when I got my first letter from the guy in Germany, just how cool that was. And then after a while, you realize I don't really know what to say, But that was the whole big thing, big pen pal program. Pakistan was one of the interesting foreign pavilions, had a very popular restaurant. Often the lines to get into the restaurant were longer than they were to get into the rest of the pavilion. And I guess for the overflow, if you couldn't fit in Pakistan, you ran next door and got a hot dog at the brass rail there. And most of these little blurbs in the back don't tell you an awful lot. We're going to see a couple of them that are very lengthy. The person must have gotten paid by the word. And in some cases, the wording is the exact wording that was in the official guidebook from the fair. This is the Pan American Highway Gardens. It was one of the areas where it had been allocated to somebody for the fair. They signed a lease on it, never built a pavilion. So now you have to come up with something in there. So this was to celebrate the fact that now, for the first time, you could drive from, say, New York all the way down through America, down through Mexico, Central America, into South America. So they had displays in here. You can see here different cities and things, statues and everything that you might see along the way. In 1965, this became a go-kart track operated by Avis. But it was a nice scenic area, very quiet. You didn't often have a lot of crowds out there, but one of the longer blurbs here, they're mentioning a two-way artery of friendship. And what was nice about this was it was a very, I think they mentioned in another picture, very nice foreground to taking pictures of the that does I thought it was mentioned. Well, yeah, it was mentioned stylized miracles by Kodak, because Kodak did these things here. these are all done paid for by Kodak. And one of the reasons Kodak put money into this was it helped make a very nice foreground for taking pictures of the Kodak pavilion with its giant, um, photographs up on the roof. So if this area hadn't been developed, it would have basically just been a flat, empty area of glass and not the most exciting. So Kodak put money into it to try to give a nice entryway into their area. This one with the big poles, it's not the Nervous Knox, but it's the Oregon State Pavilion. And you can see the big grandstand over here. So we're facing across the river here as the Flushing River. During the fair, they ended up having to put barges out here with screens on it because people realized I could sit here on this side of the river and get just as good a show as the people who had paid to sit over on the grandstand. So they had to come up with screens to block off this part of it. And they mentioned axe throwing. On my side, I do have stuff on how they ended up with, for the 1965 season, a big argument about which union, which crew is going to be the axe throwers and everything else, because the guys that did 64 at first said they weren't going to come back, they didn't make enough money, thinking that they could then, hold out, you're going to have to pay me money to come back. And then somebody else said, oh, they're not going to do it, we will. Oh, no, 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 we were only fooling, we'll come back. So kind of interesting conundrum there. Here's the other side, and again, there's a fence here, but they later ended up putting something more elaborate to block the view. Paul Bunyan here is now up in Lake George, New York, and he is standing guard up there, and you can go see him. You can get such great resolution out of some of these pictures, as far as being able to see the signs here, if you actually continue to zoom in on it. And this is only a 300 DPI resolution scan. If I wanted to do more, you can pull an awful lot out, but they were, telling you that the next show is being here, and you're going to see log rolling and axe throwing and chopping and, all the rest of it. So it was, I think we went once or twice to see it. And, what's really amazing now is you go to the next town from where we live, there's a place that has axe throwing. So it's a bar, and so we always joke about it seems to have a dangerous combination of alcohol and axes, but axe throwing evidently is a big thing to do in the nightclub world these days. So, and over here, that's again Oklahoma here, their particular the state symbol over here. And sometimes some of these got a little bit out of order, so that we'll go from Oklahoma to something else, come back to Oklahoma. And Pepsi, we all know this one, of course, the small world. It's interesting. I'm going to be giving a talk down in Anaheim next month about Disney and the World's Fair. And you think you know everything, and after a while, a guy came up with some really, really great pictures. One of the other guys I'll be speaking with, of just a sign here in the background where Disney was doing all sorts of different motifs on what the signage should look like. I had never seen in all my other searching that there was a different planned sign. And if you're at the talk next month, you'll see it, that things had changed along the way. So it's always fun when you come across something new, and you can go ooh and ah, and there's some fun of it. And the 120-foot Tower of the Four Winds, that was the Rolly Crump's kind of masterpiece, although he wasn't happy with it. We've talked about it before. He built something very nice and lacy with the very thin supports, and it was great when he built a 2-3 foot model of it. But he hadn't realized, to take into account that you can get hurricanes in New York, and since this would have to be up there for 2 years, and it was a better than 50-50 chance a big storm would come through, a thin lacy thing didn't work. So the engineers that built this one with these heavier poles. I thought it looked just great. It was really cool. All these things spun around with the winds. There were no motors. This was all mechanized by the winds of Flushing Meadows. But Rolly hated it and convinced Walt not to bring it back to Disneyland.
This is the first time I realized the tower was the same height as the Unisphere.
The same height as what?
The Unisphere.
Oh, yeah. Interesting observation. Yeah, I mean, one of the things, the tower, of course, how high is a tower? And then it's up on top of a building here. But I mentioned before how I think last week everybody had to have a tower because meet me at the tower. There were probably a good 10, 12 towers at the fair. But this was really neat. Black and white doesn't do it justice. These are all different colorful animals. So you can see down here a carousel and everything. And just all these things spun around, and as you stood nearby, there was all sorts of music and ambient sound of the crowd noise and everything, and then plus the audio leaking out from the small world. But you could hear all these things clicking and clacking and going around. It was just kind of a neat spot. This one I got a real kick out of. It's the fountains and the pool of industry, and this is where we had the fireworks show every night. You can see the walkways are not quite submerged going between the various areas. The water's just coming in. We've talked before about how you'd close the tide gate, the incoming gate to the pool. The tide would take the water out. You'd go out, fill up the fireworks, reopen up the gate, and would come and flood. But if you look into this, I mean, these things were really elaborate. You can see just on here all the mechanisms here for the launchers, the firework launchers, the lights, the pumps for the water and everything down here. This particular one's not turned on right now, but look at all the fountains and everything going in this one here. And you get into the center, these were massive fountains. And as I've shown in pictures, the videos, the water went really, really high in these things and pushed out a tremendous amount of water. And it was very loud at night, particularly loud, of course, when the fireworks went off. But this was where they had done the fireworks for the 39 fair, and they reproduced it for the 64 fair. And this was one of my favorite parts of the fair, because at night the fireworks would go, and the crowds were down. The fireworks show is really, really fantastic. And it's sad now that they ripped all this stuff out. Would have been a nice thing if they had been able to keep the fountains going in the post-fair years. So again, a big long description here, about how many different fireworks, 464 mortars. It was then this at the bottom says unsurpassed in scope and magnitude. It was really, really spectacular. The music and the fireworks and the water were all synchronized through a computer tape. So that as the music came to a crescendo, the water would react accordingly, and quiet periods the water would die down. Really, really a great area. Going in a totally different area, and this is one I always get a kick out of. This is one of the very, very few parts of the World's Fair to survive. You think of all the things you would have, that you might have wanted to save out of the fair. Well, one of the buildings saved was the United States Post Office, which is now a warehouse used by the Parks Department to store stuff. And I know Joey was able to arrange to get a number of visitors in on a walking trip. And there's no mementos of the fair left or anything that exists. But out front, you had mailboxes from around the world, different ones. Then over here, you had these tables, zoom in on them just a little bit, sort of space age looking tables that you could write out your postcards and everything else with lights that came down from up above. And if you went inside, as it goes and describes, this was the day they had just come up with zip code, and they were using more and more machines to sort mail. And as this mentions, they could handle the mail of a city the size of, say, New Jersey or Kansas City. So they had all these machines inside sorting mail, and the fair did generate a fair amount of mail. I understand they also would bring in mail from other post offices around the area to run through the machines so that they didn't run out of it, because you could only sort so many postcards or so many whatever. But they also had stamps on display. I got a kick here. The clerks, fluent in foreign languages, stationed at separate windows, and I can't imagine how effective that was. That did you have the Spanish window, the French window, the German window, the Indian window, whatever. So I imagine that was one that probably sounded more than it actually was. Excuse me. Protestant and Orthodox Center, one of the serpentine phone booths down in the foreground there. When the fair was being demolished and the whole thing was being taken to pieces, this tower was one of the last pieces of the fair still to exist. Mention everybody at a tower, and that's why a lot of these things survived in the demolition area, was as you were coming in to pick up your scrap steel or your air conditioner you had bought at auction, where did you find it when half the pavilions were reduced to rubble? So they left up all sorts of these towers, and they would tell people, go to the tower with a cross in it, and that's where your pile of rubble is. But it's very bizarre to see a couple of the General Foods arches still standing, the towers like this, some of the others still standing up there, and just piles of ruined buildings and everything in every direction. So again, a little description here. Mentioned before how the stained glass window from this pavilion is here in my town, Granada Hills, California. So little bits of the fair. Matter of fact, the church that it's in was sold about 4 or 5 years ago, and the new people that bought it, another church bought it, didn't know where their window had come from, and gave them some information on it. So it's still with us. Another panorama view of it, and up here we've got very large one of the luminaires up above it. Same description on here. Polynesian Pavilion was a great one for having a restaurant. They had quite a large seating area outside, which was very smart of them, and not only allowed them to have a larger capacity of the restaurant, it did have an indoor area as well. But sitting outside, and you see all these people sitting and eating and having, these sort of exotic looking meals, kind of entice you to come on inside and get some of it yourself. I got a kick out of this one, and again, very, very few people on it, and it looks like a very quiet day for the Skyway. So I guess as this was taken during the preview days of the fair, and they're just testing things out, but again, very early number of the publicity photos. More of a look here at the Polynesian, the other side of it, the entrance area, and we can zoom and look at some of the signs. What was interesting, I don't know if you caught a picture of Time magazine outside the Oregon Pavilion, but Time magazine had done an article about the fair, and if you had any sort of a mention in Time magazine, people were reproducing copies of it and sticking it outside their pavilion. Over here, a sign about, they have dancers inside, and they did a very nice show. But if you look at later pictures, the things like this that are gone, they're all about how you can come and get a waffle. I mean, so you think about, once the Belgian waffles became the big hit, everybody had to have them. So over in the Polynesian area, you can see signs about a steak dinner and waffles, because I guess people weren't just buying all the exotic food. You try to sell what people are buying, right? Philippine Pavilion, really nice one. Mentions on the background how it's patterned after a traditional native hat over there. Most of the displays down were for the average public, were down here. Upstairs is more of a VIP area, and also if you were a industrialist that was interested in using Philippine labor or Philippine products in your business, they would wine you and dine you and entertain you up here. So just the background up here. They also had other displays down the ground. They had a jeepney, one of the things where you take after the war, they ended up with all sorts of things, jeeps and everything else just left over there, and they started decorating them and turning them into like their version of taxis and stuff like that. They had those on display. The pavilion was a geodesic dome in 1964. It was intended as a general purpose pavilion. They did some of the United States Olympic trials in here. They had the television show Queen for a Day came and shot at the fair for I think a whole week, and you could come out and go and watch the woman be queen. And Albert Fisher, who's been with us before, has a great picture of himself sitting in the Queen of the Queen for the Day's throne, that he was able to sit down there. But all sorts of different things. It was used for church services on Sundays by a number of the different religions participating at the fair. In 1965, this became the Winston Churchill Pavilion. So they basically got rid of the general purpose thing. So it wasn't used a lot, as you can imagine. You know, it was a big empty building with lots of seating area and stage and that. I think some of that's mentioned on the next thing. But
My favorite offbeat use for the pavilion was they had a national accordion convention and contest.
I cannot imagine a whole building, a giant dome like that full of accordion players. That would have been crazy. But yeah, it was a very big thing, and you could rent it out and do different events in there. So I've got a number of pictures of people going in with various signage of what was in there. I'm gonna have to look for an accordion one. This one is kind of interesting, being a black and white photo. You know, when we first look at it, you think it's the Port Authority Pavilion is burning away. No, it's just the way the sun was behind the cloud, the helicopter going overhead, but Chrysler down in the foreground, and one of the helicopters up there. And one of the longer little blurbs in the back here. The building, of course, is still out there today. Is used just basically for catering purposes and that. But that was a big thing for you know, during the period that after the fair closed, everybody went to have their high school proms out there, that sort of thing, and it's still available. If you want to go and rent it and have maybe we're going to do that. Maybe we're going to have a 60th anniversary dinner there. But it's still there. It was actually interesting. They ended up in trouble because after the fair closed, and they were rewiring the whole fairgrounds and everything, it turned out nobody had checked the electric bills for the pavilion, and they were getting free electricity for years and years. And then the city, of course, decided that they wanted it, and it ended up becoming a big court battle and everything else. But I guess, you know, you think about it, if you're running an operation this way size, you would know if you were going to be getting an electric bill or not. I guess they decided to take the don't ask, don't tell, and see if anybody ever shows up. See if anybody shows up. And we have Sid and Marty Croft here. They had their puppet show. They did these very elaborate puppets. We're going to see one of them in detail in a second. But this was supposed to be a more of an adult themed puppet show. So they had you know, Las Vegas girl type costumes and that. Then they mentioned here in the background that you know, they had voices done by some of the regional people, and some big name stars there. So very elaborate show, and it was pretty popular. And then they kept updating it as the time went on. So does anybody want to guess who this is, puppet wise?
Tyler Gore
How about Anne Margaret?
or Bridget Bardot?
Ah, we have a winner.
Yeah.
So Bridget Bardot, I love how they just left the blank space, so they have different pictures of the different puppets. They didn't have to go to all the trouble to type up an extra blurb. They would just write it in here. What I got to kick also here, and I don't know why it's written in, they talk about the lavish Walter-Croft Theater. It was always the Croft Theater as far as I know. Walter had the Wax Museum. I never heard of any partnership or link between the two of them, so I don't know who wrote this in or why, but yes, Bridget Bardot. So if you couldn't see the real one in person, you could see her.
Croft passed away recently. About a
Yeah.
month ago.
Look at all the strings though it took to bring these puppets to life. You know, it really. If you watch the show, they did some pretty interesting puppetry work there. Particularly when they had a giant monster came to life, picked up one of the puppets, carried her away. It was like a Frankenstein monster, and he comes up and he goes over and he picks up another puppet. And every time I see that on video, I keep thinking about, boy, that'd be, you know, tough to keep the strings from getting tangled. Then we have the main mall. We have the rocket thrower still there today. The Unisphere down in the background. So very familiar shot. It looks like a lot like the United States postage stamp that they did. tree shaded areas where visitors may relax, and they did, and they like to stick their feet in the water. Very bland building, and this stood there for years and years and years. This was the press pavilion. So it was not on the main side of the fairgrounds. It was on the other side of the subway line that ran, the number 7 that runs through. But this was designed and purpose built to be a press facility. They had a small TV studio in there for people who could do, remotes, that sort of thing. Majority of it was for the print press, magazines, newspapers, and that. After the fair ended, this became a New York City police precinct. Was there for years. I was back there one time in the 80s or something, and I took out my camera, taking pictures, and the next thing I know, I had cops very interested in why I was taking a picture of their station, and I was able to convince them, hey, I'm a World's Fair nut. I'm also a LAPD nut, and just taking pictures of the building, nothing personal, but it was torn down a number of years ago. And here again mentions the details of it. So they could, do all sorts of displays and exhibits and things in there. And it was not originally planned to be a permanent pavilion, but it lasted a good 50 years after the fair did. And here's Sid and Marty Cross. Again, some of these got them slightly out of order. This is a earlier picture of it because as they went on, they got more and more sensational. They put up things like giant word balloons up here. The so and such the theater critic says whatever. This was interesting. The all new 1965 edition, but it was actually in 1964. And it was just like you come up with the 1965 Chevys, you sell them in 1964. Well, you get the people in with a hook that you're seeing something brand new. So the 65 edition was actually available in 64. I don't know if it shows up on this this window too much. Let's see if it does. No, on some of these other things, they gave out coupons. Coupon books that you could get for discount tickets to the fairs, and they came up with fair cash, and you could buy your ticket for $2 and you could get $1 worth of fair cash, so you could only have to pay $1 for it. So but inside you could see there were 250 stars, gorgeous girls. Of course, they were all made out of wood. And in the background, the stuff again you can make out. They go in the lobby and get yourself a Coke.
It does say Walter Croft Theater on the poster there.
Yeah. So interesting to see how you learn different things. So maybe he had some money in it. A 1965 edition Fiesta. The way this looks in black and white, it looks more like Bet. But the other letters, if you look real closely, you can see that they're in there. This was a 65 edition. You could come in and wander through the place. But if you were a kid and you could fit through here, you didn't have to pay to go into the place. So it's a nice way of just letting the kids in for free would be easy enough. But now the kids could all feel special by going in this little special gate here. This is basically, it says folk art from around the world. There wasn't an awful lot of it. It was mostly food tents and little things you can see, little areas here. Did not turn out to be real popular. I have quite a few pictures of it empty because you had to pay to come in and pay to go buy food, when you could walk into any one of 100 other places and buy the food without having to pay an admission price. So a little bit of their blurb in the back. We were talking, Carol, you may get a kick out of this. We were talking about airplanes and that. Restaurant Associates was the same one that owned B7. The guy was out here. He was a real interesting character. He did all these themed restaurants from around the world. And they had
94th Aero Squadron?
what's that?
Is that the 94th Aero Squadron?
95th Aero Squadron, right. This guy had a great thing. He would buy an airplane and he would park it at an airport and do a airplane themed restaurant. And that way he could buy these airplanes, fly them, have a great time, but he could write it off against his business. So Restaurant Associates would buy all these different things and do all these themed restaurants around the country. and they were in business back here. Obviously, no airplanes, but it was another one where I think the company may still be around, but when the founder died, it was all of a sudden, what do we do with all these airplanes? Chrysler down here in the foreground. This is a construction shot. If we look in, you can see all sorts of cars and trucks and everything still parked over here. All the buses that were going to be used for the fair are delivered out here, sitting in the parking lot. And down here, the guys are at work putting together the Chrysler zoo animals, which were all built from pieces of car parts. So they're assembling and putting them all together down here. And well, I guess they were promoting the Port Authority in the picture, and then we have more of the this description down there. For me, I was more interested in seeing the Chrysler piece of it. And here's another one early on, the heliports up here on the roof, the giant Chrysler car, the main Chrysler Pavilion, the Chrysler rocket. But down below, they had the 360-degree film about New York. And this was became a real great secret entrance to the fair right here, because you could, let me zoom in on this. You could come walking in here, go into the restaurant and everything. And if you came down one of the back stairways, you could just walk out into the fair. So apparently they never caught on to that because I never heard of them changing it, but it became a known thing that there was no entrance charge, no ticket booths, anything to go into the restaurant. And you could just walk down the back. You think they put an alert for an emergency alarm or something in it, but that became some people like to jump over the fences off some of the highway overpasses or whatever, and that became another way in. And then you can just see some of the buses and everything out here. Brass Rail Restaurant up here, again mentioned early. There's no balloon on this particular one for whatever reason. And more about the Port Authority. Small little pavilion, the Russian Orthodox Church. This really, seemed way out of the, it was right near the Bell System Pavilion. So you went through all the modern, things about satellite communications and everything else. And then there was this small wooden structure off to the side. They had a gift shop inside. They sold reproductions of, famous artwork. We'll see one in a second. But I remember going in there, I think probably once or twice, and being an ancient building, it didn't have air conditioning. And I remember going in there and taking a look around and going, it's hotter than hell. Thank you very much. So again, this is a replica of a church which is still up in Fort Ross, Northern California. And again, it displays of artwork and that. And you could buy books of stuff, and you could also buy 3D recreations of various art. So I don't think they had, they said this is more than 1,000 gems valued at $500,000. My impression was most of what was there was reproductions. Obviously, this is saying this was worth $500,000 because all these are jewels set into this piece of artwork. Another tower, 7-Up, that was a very, very popular spot. They had sandwich platters from around the world. You could go in and you could get I think they had maybe 4 or 5 different sandwich platters that you could get. And they were very economical, but you could also get all these 7-Ups that you could drink. So there was a great marketing ploy for them. Down below, you had seating areas that sit out of the sun and eat. But they also would have different bands come in. And again, a great idea for 7-Up. Invite every band in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area to come in and play. Don't pay them, but give them free publicity. And these bands would come in, perform, and it was a fun spot to sit and listen to some of them. Most of them were playing, more of the Beatles type music, being 64 and 65 that was there. But every now and then somebody would come in and be a folk singer or something else, and sometimes they were getting bigger crowds than the Beatle clones. So 7-Up, very popular, as I mentioned. This Swiss Skyway, this a very big ropeway. We had like, for example, at Disneyland, you had a system like this with a tower and going back and forth. Well, on the World's Fair, you had two sets of them going back and forth. And the blurb on the next thing tells us how high it went. But it was a really great way to see the fair. And I like to try to sometimes time it to be up there during the fireworks show because you could get a really great view of it. So 112 feet up there, and it would take you 5 minutes to get all the way across the fairgrounds. It was I really liked it. I thought it was a great thing. Most of the system is now in Great Adventure in New Jersey. We're looking down at Rheingold, back over here, all reproductions of New York's buildings when they had basically shops in here. You could buy clothing and things like that. Down out here was a gazebo and a bandstand. They had Keystone Cop saxophone group that would come out and play, and other groups who would come in and entertain here. And of course, one of the things you could do is you can come over here and buy beer and come out and set up these picnic tables and just enjoy yourself. So a number of beer stands out there. And so creation of Little New York in 1904, and there was a big restaurant inside. Oh God, the name of the company, a Post House restaurant, operated the restaurant inside for them. Here's one for Wayne, the RCA, the official color TV communication center. And it was a big thing to go watch yourself on TV at the time. Little interesting things like all these little circles up here, full-size circles here, but half-size ones here. These were all made out of copper. And after the fair ended, the fellow that was the designer of it was able to convince RCA to let him have these things back. And he sold them off with his name signed to the back of them. So they show up every now and then on eBay at auction houses, but there's still pieces of the RCA pavilion that are out there in existence. Long blurb on this particular one. They had a thing in here where if you had a lost kid, they could bring you in here to the excuse me, into RCA. They would take the picture and put it on TV sets or around the fairgrounds. The little Johnny Jones is lost, and then they would have toys and stuff to try to entertain the kids to keep them busy. They would also realize that a lot of times the parents weren't seeing the TV sets that were scattered around, so they would have to make an announcement that little Johnny Jones has been found. But they also had a remote unit which was available for rental. So if you wanted to do your TV show and have it broadcast through the fair, this would get linked out the coaxial cable over to the Bell System Pavilion, and then they could broadcast it out live around the world. Or they could use the amazing new invention of videotape, and color videotape was a big thing in 1964. And I showed a picture in a prior one how that you could see yourself on TV, and they had basically a tape delay, but it wasn't done like today with computers where everything's digitized and you play it back. They basically had one machine to the left, one machine to the right, 5 feet or so in between, and the delay was done by the time it took the tape to go off the play unit on one machine onto the take-up unit on the other. Sweden had a real nice pavilion. I got a kick out of it because it had a lot of ultra modern things. It was sort of like the IKEA of its time. Not that they sold furniture, but everything very streamlined, modern. And they had a very nice display inside of glasswork and things that you could buy at their shop. And inside things about Saab aircraft and other things that were offerings of the country. They mentioned smorgasbord. I don't think I ever ate at this particular one. I think it was again out of my price range. We have a couple shots of Switzerland. We have here you see all sorts of Switzerland. We see the Swiss Sky Ride that we're taking this from and going down into the station there. Here, by the way, is the Pavilion of Paris that we saw before. Here's where the sculpture was, the back side of it. But this is the main Swiss pavilion here. So this is where a restaurant was. And over here, we're going to see more about the clock mechanisms and that. So two main parts, the Swiss restaurant. We just said that. Why are they telling us this again? But this was an interesting thing here. They had the official World's Fair Time Center. So they were trying to be very accurate and keep all of the Swiss time and making sure that everybody knew how accurate Swiss watches were. And these displays here were talking about how they did it and timed it to a massive tuning fork thing. But my uncle worked on this particular one. He worked for New York Telephone, and one of his jobs was connect the Swiss clock here to all these Swiss clocks that were scattered around the center, around the fairgrounds. So those are the ones again in the towers with this clock and a little number on it. And this is probably one of the things that helped spark my interest in the fair, because Uncle Bill would come home, from working at the fair. He was also installing the serpentine phone booths and the family phone booths and that. But we'd be, see him at Thanksgiving or Easter or something like that, and he'd be talking about, boy, this is the craziest project I've ever worked on in all my days at the phone company. So, and listening to him, he got us real excited about it. And, you felt real family pride when you walked into the gate. And right as you came in the main gate, there was one of the Swiss clocks, and you go, hey, my Uncle Bill, he put that in there. So I still to this day get a real kick when I see stuff of the Swiss pavilion. And again, lots of the international pavilions. Some of them had very popular restaurants like Pakistan and that. I think Sudan had a restaurant too, but I don't remember it being anything earth-shattering. But this really was, as we mentioned before, all these pavilions were put in by companies because the BIE convinced the governments not to do it. This is a pretty elaborate sort of pavilion that these people put together, not just a boxy sort of thing like the pavilion of Paris. They went out of their way to come up with the structures that would reflect the character of their country. And description here. If it was free, I went to it. I know that. So I don't remember the movie at all, but if it was free, I went for sure. And another one is 7-Up, their tower, and the tents down below. And in here, this was the whole big restaurant area where you came in, got your tray of food, and it was kind of fun to go on one day, get one sandwich, come back, get another one the next day. And the trays for this still show up on eBay a lot. The plastic on them over 60 years has become sort of fragile, so you don't want to use them for everything you wear. Matter of fact, if you do, they won't last. But they're still kind of neat. They came in different colors, and they were kind of neat.
Yeah, the other thing about those trays that I found out the hard way is the blue ink they used on it fades terribly in
Yes.
the light. So if you do find some blue ones, unfortunately, you'll have to keep them in a box or else lose the color.
Yeah, I also found out the hard way. If you put 2 or 3 of them stacked together and then get any sort of heat, you've now got one plate. So SKF, pavilion, I'd never expect to see at a World's Fair, but the wonderful world of ball bearings. So they had a whole big thing in here. You don't think about how many things ball bearings are in your everyday life, but SKF wanted to make you aware of that. They had all sorts of things in there, including a very, very early Jim Henson design monster character. It was one of his first big commercial jobs that he got, and brought that to life. And this is the pavilion where they were giving out free samples of ball bearings, that never thinking that if you could get a straw at the terrestrial restaurant and a free ball bearing from SKF, what were people going to do? I got a kick looking down at this one. If we zoom in here a little bit, is somebody here about to go into a fountain or a lawn or anything of it? I mean, whatever he was doing, he's caught in midair here. It looks like a bunch of construction guys are still doing something, but just the casual thing of somebody taking a picture, and you just catch these little details that you don't expect. The world of motion engineering. whoops, there we go. Simmons Pavilion. This was Simmons Beauty Restaurants and mattresses rather. Up here you had all these little kiosks where you could rent a room and take a nap. Very strictly supervised, so you could not have a play date at the fair with your paramour or whatever. But I cannot imagine of going to the World's Fair and paying money to go to sleep. I mean, I would come home from the World's Fair so exhausted, my feet were raw, I was tired as hell, but there was no way. Somebody said, "Hey, Bill, would you like to go, pay money to take a 30-minute nap?" No way, 30 minutes. I could go ride ride this ride.
How did you know? How did you know the particular detail, Bill? Did you try it?
Nope, there are all sorts of what you call it brochures and stuff about it. So you get a half hour in quiet and comfort and 46 alcoves. There is a nominal charge. On my site, I have the whole press booklet for both years of the fair, and they do mention how they had hostesses, because you would go in there and they'd have to change the sheets in between every set of use for it. So they downplayed this use for it for the 65 season, because it was they were costing them more money to operate it than people were paying to use it. Sermons from Science, been at lots and lots of World Fairs, pretty much doing the same exhibit with the theory that science and religion are linked together, and that it's your faith in God that allows 50,000 volts of electricity to flow through you, things along that line. So they basically had up in Expo 67 a much more interesting pavilion, but they had the same pavilion, the same exhibit at the 62 World Fair in Seattle. They came out and redid the show. And it was kind of neat. You watch go there, and I think they put the 60,000 volts or something through people. Half the people were probably hoping something would go wrong, but luckily it did not. Schaefer, the one beer to have when you're having more than one. There were so many New York brands at the time, and Schaefer was a big one. They had a big restaurant inside. I've got pictures inside on my side of a giant buffet in there. But they also tied into a big sports theme because, again, Schaefer beer was big at it. I forget, like Yankee Stadium would have one beer. The Polo Grounds would have another one. I don't remember which beer went with what stadium, but they brought all sorts of sports celebrities in to sign autographs here at the fair. And I can remember going out there, and Casey Stengel was signing autographs. Another time you go back, be Rocky Graziano. You go another time, it'd be Mickey Mantle. So as a New York sports fan, even though obviously at age 12 I couldn't drink beer, Schaefer was the one you always made a beeline to, because you wanted to see who was out front giving autographs. And what was really nice back at this point in time, most of these people were absolutely friendly in hell. You could talk to them, and until the line got long, then they'd move you along. But this wasn't like autograph shows today where they're going to charge you 25 bucks or 50 bucks or whatever for their autograph. And these were, big name celebrities. If you're growing up in New York, you certainly knew who Rocky Graziano was, or, Mickey Mantle or Roger Maris or any of these people. And you go out there and, line up, get your picture taken, shake their hand. And it was, I thought it was a really nice thing that Schaefer did by making so many of the celebrities available like that. Curved diorama, they had figures showing how they made beer. Another shot in the distance. You can imagine adults also like Schaefer because they did sell beer. So if you want to convince your folks, hey, I want to go meet Rocky Graziano and you can have a beer, it wasn't a hard sell. Same little write-up. And the restaurant inside, the buffet was really, really good. They also, if we zoom in here, they had all sorts of areas setting up here where they could just, if you didn't want the whole restaurant service or anything, you could just walk in, come up here, and the guy would sell you beer. It was popular. Spain was one of the few countries that told the BIE to go and get lost. They were going to go participate. So they really put a lot of money into their pavilion. It was very, very stylish and elegant looking from the outside. And the inside was even better. Lots of work by people like Salvador Dali. They had dance troupes that performed all the time, flamenco dance shows that were really popular. They also introduced the amazing invention of sangria into the United States. So if you look up famous first for World's Fairs, it will often show up that sangria at the Spain Pavilion. After the fair, the restaurant, the whole building was taken down, transported to become a hotel in St. Louis, and it's been super changed and everything, and there's little bits and pieces of it still left. So a little bit of a right up here. Again, wine caves. That was I think where sangria became the big thing. This is a building that I hopefully, if anybody here and the group ever went to the World's Fair, hopefully they did not get a visit to this pavilion. Anybody know what this pavilion is?
Jail?
Boy, you're on a roll. This is the security building. So it's at the Pastorell complex. You can see one of the gates of the pylons up here. But yeah, if you got in trouble, you got down here, and there was an entrance to the subway. But this is where hopefully most of it, you came in, and they actually had a separate building for ID cards and that sort of things, because they had to give out so many passes and ID cards and everything. But if you had a minor issue, locked and found and everything, you could come in here. But if you had done anything really dumb, this is where you came in. You can see one of their little Cushman police carts off to the side here. Thailand super pavilion. I've shown pictures before of the guy hanging on a crane putting gold gilt on the roof of the building, and they used up all the gold gilt anywhere in New York and had to start flying in from other parts of the country. But long lines often waiting to go in, and inside there was a display about the king and queen of Thailand. And then a restaurant over here to the side, and then over in this area, more about the history of Thailand. They took this entire building apart, took it to Montreal, and actually greatly enlarged it. They had seen how popular it had become in New York, that they enlarged it by 50% by putting another building off to the side, and it stayed up in Montreal for years and years. I think originally it's been supposed to go to Montreal for a year and then go back to Thailand. Well, when Expo 67 became Man in His World, it stayed there for years. And I believe it finally got to the point where it had decayed enough that I don't think it went back to Thailand, but I've never been able to get a definitive indication of what where it became. Very nice pavilion though. And one of the things I do remember is the staff in there was very polite and very interested in answering questions about their country. So I don't think we ever ate at this restaurant. Now, you know, a lot of times, you know, what do we do? Oh, we need to get something quick to eat. It's you know, getting late. Hey, let's run down. The nearest restaurant to our house happens to be a Thai restaurant. So you know, stuff that was so exotic in 1964. Now that the closest restaurant to Bill's house is actually a Thai restaurant. Tower of Light, massive pavilion. We're going to see it from the air. Really, quite a large footprint that it had. These are all aluminum panels. Big display inside a stage show with Ready Kilowatt and Benjamin Franklin. Everything about the electricity. Mentioned some of it here about the towers. I don't think these towers are actually 1,200 feet high. I think that might be a little bit off there. But this again gives you an idea of just how big this thing was from the air. This is the entranceway over here, a giant sculpture of metal pipes that were all wired together. You would go up the speed ramp here into the building, and then inside they had the stage show in one part of it, and then other parts about how electricity from your investor-owned electric companies for you know, making America great. Very large footprint around here with water around it. So at night, You know, you could get the light shining here, bouncing off the water. It looked nice. In the background here, this is the Tipperillo Band Pavilion. We'll see a little bit more of that in the grandstands here. This was another area supposed to be something else. A lease fell through. Robert Moses said we need to get something done. Well, Robert Moses was friends with Guy Lombardo. They convinced Tipperillo that the Guy Lombardo and his Royal Canadian should entertain here at the fair. So they put this together really fast. But again, this is just a gigantic pavilion over here, and we go and look to the next side. Here was the front that we just saw before, and here's the back side of it. But just all these, you wonder where all these metal panels all ended up, or probably some scrap dealer. Unfortunately, that's what happened to the sculpture out here. Somebody bought the sculpture. The artist was thrilled when the guy reached out to him, thought he wanted him to help put the thing back together. And the guy said no, he wanted to know what sort of metal it was made out of because he was selling it for scrap. So unfortunately, some things did not last. But there are some people that are real fans of the Tower of Light and have built some very elaborate 3D models of it. In the center here is where the giant beam of light shone up every night, and you could see it from miles and miles around. 1 billion candle power. So it was pretty impressive. This, by the way, was the thing that drove poor Mr. Lincoln crazy when they would be testing this you know, Tower of Light, turning the light on, lighting up that billion candle power. The surge for the 30 or 25-year-old wiring in the ground would travel all the way over to the Illinois pavilion, and Mr. Lincoln would start smashing his chair to pieces. So this was one.
Wasn't there a story about that light beam interfering with operations at LaGuardia Airport?
No, I think they were pretty careful about that it went straight up, and it was not, when they situated this pavilion, it was not under the direct flight path into LaGuardia. And that was a consideration that, you know, for all the pavilions at the fair, you couldn't just have, you know, lights going off. So luckily, this was not in line with one of the runways. And as a result, you know, the guys would see it there. Matter of fact, they could use it as a indicator where they were, but they didn't have to fly over it or through it.
Okay.
Travel and Transportation Pavilion was originally supposed to be a very different design. Last minute, they decided to go with this giant moon-shaped dome. And in here, this is where they did the Circle-O-Rama movie in here that Douglas Trumbull did the special effects for, that what got him into you know, Stanley Kubrick saw it and got him into doing the effects for 2001: A Space Odyssey. Here is SKF, the ball bearing folks we saw down below. And again, this was one of the last pavilions torn down at the end of the fair. Not because they wanted to keep it for anything, it's because the guys that built it basically said, we're out of money, we can't afford to tear it down, sue us, and walked away. So pictures on my site, you can go see all this is gone. Everything else around is empty, and this pavilion is still sitting there because the Fair Corporation was trying to sue them. And after a while, they realized you can only get so much money out of a rock. We're going to have to tear it down ourselves. And it was an interesting pavilion. I liked it. They had the cars from The Great Race in there, one of my favorite movies. And they also had a neat display. United Airlines had a neat movie in there. It was a great pavilion. It was free. And, you know, I could easily end up spending 2-3 hours in there at a time. United States Space Park. This was very interesting because it was one of the only, of all the pictures in this group, was the only one that was a color publicity photo. So I told the scanner, do a quick restore and I'll work more on it. But very accurate to what was actually built. All the displays out here, the rockets, the panels that went around it, just, you know, with all the things about the various satellites and probes and everything, the X-15 over here. And Ford, this Hall of Science, The fair looked much greener in this than in real life because I think the trees are easier to make look older in this picture than they were at the time. Travelers insurance, big red umbrella. Over here was the entranceway and very nice stained glass windows going into it at night. And this was a display of the history of mankind and taking himself from savages up to modern day time. The Triumph of Man. This is, of course, this is the one I got a kick out of. Occupying approximately 49,487 square feet. Now, to me, I might have said approximately 49,500 square feet, but the approximately 487, I just found that to be an interesting contradiction. This is, of course, the sign, the site for the thing that is always billed on eBay as a rare record from the 1964 World's Fair. Travelers gave out those small red records, plus they were in red vinyl, and they gave out as many as you wanted, and they must have made a zillion. I mean, I think they were predicting the fair would have had something like 90 million people and 70 million came. Well, they must have made a record for everybody, because after the fair ended, they took the display, put it in a different location, and for years was still giving out the red records. But I get letters from people from time to time. Oh, I got this really neat red record. How much is it worth? And you go, $1. You know, they gave out so many of them. And a nice aerial view of it. Fountains all around the edges of it don't really show up in this particular picture, but it was nice because the fountains gave the building the illusion it was floating on top of the water. More Space Park, the boat tail stage of the Saturn V. You could walk underneath it, push a button, the rockets would light up with red like they were firing, and roar of thundering engines and everything. And I can remember scaring one of my younger brothers to death because he thought the thing was actually taking off over our head. Mentioned before in other talks, this was an actual Mercury capsule that had been launched as a test. The concept up here, this tower on top of the rocket, is the escape tower. So if anything went wrong and the rocket was blowing up or falling apart, small little rockets right here would ignite, lift the capsule off and fly it downrange. So they wanted to find out if it would actually work or not. They took it to a place, I think it was called Wallace Beach, launched the capsule, went up, came down, and then they gave it to the World's Fair to display and forgot it. So this was the first Mercury capsule ever launched by a rocket, and it's now on display inside the Hall of Science Pavilion. The restored pavilion, rocket out there now has a replica on it. But they were quite excited when they were restoring the rocket, got up to it and found out it was a real live Mercury capsule. And some of the description of what was there. We mentioned some of the rockets. One of them is now on display where Ken Carpenter works down at the Space Center there. Egyptian Pavilion, UAR was an attempt, the United Arab Republic, to come together with a number of nations combining. They found out that worked really well on paper, but everybody has their own agendas, so the UAR fell apart, but Egypt still participated here at the fair, and it was a nice pavilion, very nice at night. The whole entranceway really lit up with glass panels, and they're saying typical architecture. Again, this was nice that it was all done. I don't remember if this was a government sponsored one or not. I don't remember if they went against the BIE or not. But what was nice, they had all sorts of displays inside about their artwork. They also had a big thing about the big dam that was being built across the Nile, their efforts to save some of the natural treasures that were being flooded out. So it was a nice pavilion. I had a nice time talking to people working in there. This one I got a kick out of. The emphasis here for the U.S. Royal attire, but I got a real kick here at the kids with the stroller, and they've got their World's Fair hats on and everything. One of the sculptures, which is still in the park today, But I like I said, the intent here is to sell you on the US Royal Tire. I thought it was a great advertisement for Hertz. You can actually ride in a giant tire, 80-foot tall. And we go to from one thing from going up in the air, now we're going to go down on the ground. This was the day, of course, when everybody was worried about the nuclear war. So they were putting fallout shelters in their backyard. And this guy decided, well, besides a fallout shelter and living down there in an emergency, why don't you just live down there full time? So this was the above ground entrance to the underground world home. And the description from it, completely encased in a concrete shell, 5 feet under the Earth's surface. And this was his whole hope. He had built one or two of these things for multi-millionaires, and his whole idea now was to build these for the average person. So you could get a piece of property, put your whole house underground, and as he talks about, you get pure air, climate control, no noise, freedom from everything. They found out, of course, that these were fairly expensive to build, and it did not take off. But if you were worried about being claustrophobic, you could go down in here and you could be in the living room of the house. It had a piano down here, and the next one we'll talk about the lighting and everything. But one of the whole things was that you could simulate daytime, nighttime, and you could also say, what do I want to see out on my window? Do I want the patio today? I can have the backdrop look like the Grand Canyon, or I could have the backdrop look like I'm at the beach. So it was a very ambitious area. You paid, I think, about 50 cents to come down and visit the underground world home. Here, owner may dial the proper blends of electrical sunshine, twilight, that sort of thing. And this is another display inside. I believe this is the bedroom. And outside your bedroom, you can see, this nice ocean scene out there. Or again, just like on a giant roll of wallpaper, you could crank up, change that picture, and you'd have another thing of a forest scene or something else. So, it's actually interesting. Like I sit here in my office, I have a window, but the blinds are almost always closed on it just because of the way the sun is out. It would get too bright inside. So you start thinking about, I wonder how claustrophobic it would be, but I realize I look outside that window probably once a year, so, underground world homes didn't take off, but they sure as hell tried. And again, you can change the moonlight. You can do anything you wanted. Super popular pavilion at the fair, the Vatican Pavilion. Money raised by churches all across the New York area. Home, of course, to the Pieta, which amazingly did not show up in any of the publicity pictures. But at least not in this batch. I'm sure there's quite a few of them. But very, very popular. Being Catholic, it was a must go to and have to see. And I think even if you weren't Catholic, the setting of the whole thing with the way the statue was displayed was very very awe-inspiring. If you didn't want the religious aspect of it, you could still admire the artwork that it took to create that. So big long description here of it. Chapel in there, they had religious services all the time. And a lot of things that was popular was that people that were being newly ordained into the priesthood could come out and serve a mass out here, and the family members could come in and basically celebrate their their step into the priesthood. And it was a very, very popular pavilion. This whole area here we saw in a prior talk has been relocated to Groton, Connecticut, and still operates as a Catholic church there today. Pavilion of Valenzuela was a big thing about Victoria Falls and the scenic thing. But it was also about, boy, do you realize how much really neat wood we have in Venezuela? And you can make all sorts of neat stuff out of it, and you'd like to come and buy it. We also have all sorts of things like iron ore and other odds and ends. So big thing trying to sell Venezuela industry and that to the United States. We hop from there over to a very different scene here of the Wax Museum. Again, so as I mentioned, they kind of got out of order, but I don't recall seeing this view in other things promoting the wax. This is a night in Paris, or Paris by night. Now, I've been to Paris a lot. I don't remember seeing, man, I've probably seen this part of Paris at night, but I don't think I've ever seen this part of Paris at night, which is really glad that I did not. But yeah, the Wax Museum had some really crazy displays on it. Then we hop over to Westinghouse. Again, they were not in the area with most of the other industrial countries or companies, because this is where they had been for the 39 World's Fair, and they had buried their time capsule down here, and they wanted to bury this one for 64. So they were a little isolated by everybody else. A telephoto lens makes this look close to this. This is actually on the other side of the Grand Central Parkway. It's that far away. Long description, again, just what I mentioned, the side of the original time capsule. Thing would hang above the ground there, and then they would drop that down. If anybody is there in 5,000 years and they dig it up, please let us know how it worked out. Wisconsin, the home of Tad's Steakhouse, which I just loved eating at Tad's Steakhouse. It was $1.29 or something. You got a steak, a baked potato, a piece of garlic bread, and everything. It was really great. But also the home to the world's biggest cheese, and it is now a radio station. I think it's Nellville is the name of the town in Wisconsin. So guy bought the whole pavilion, put it on a truck, took it back, and put a radio station in it. The overhead view. Also, a lot of this area back here, this is where the world's largest cheese was. But and this is a sled, a silo you came up and slid on a burlap sack down to the bottom. But things that you don't think, where did they go? People bought this metal shed out here and everything, and it became the roof for a dining hall for a Boy Scout camp. So funny how things went all around the country and served all sorts of different uses. And we're getting just about down to the end. The WBT 2000 Tribes, promoting the fact that they were translating the Bible into all the different languages, so that if they found a native group somewhere in the Amazon jungle, and there were only 50 of them, and they had a unique language, where these people would take the time and effort to translate the Bible into their tongue, so that everybody had access to it. And they also had a very small and a very large Bible in there to give you examples. How, what you could do reducing it to microfilm. West Virginia, their big thing was you could come in here and win a house, which I never did find out who won the house, but they would build you a mountaintop house, which looked really nice in the model in West Virginia, and was a typical display of why you want to come here. Tourism is great, natural resources are great. And we're down right near the end, the armillary sphere. We see the giant unit sphere in the background, but this armillary sphere was done by Paul Manship, who had also done Prometheus at the Rockefeller Center. He had done the big thing, the sundial that I really liked at the 39 World's Fair, and Man That Fades at Time. As a matter of fact, he did a bunch of sculptures for the 39 fair. This was left in the fair as a permanent piece of statuary left there. Unfortunately, one day some guys came in with a blowtorch, cut it off, rolled it onto a truck, and took it away. They have since found a few of the signs of the zodiac and got them back. They found them in some guy's apartment when he died. But the major pieces, all these rings have gone, these statues are gone. I think they got back maybe 4 of the signs of the zodiac. And again, mentions him. It was a really nice piece of work, and it's too bad it got lost. And you can see down here, presented to the World's Fair, presented by the World's Fair to the city of New York, and it was supposed to stay there, and unfortunately, the buttheads ruined it for everybody and took it away. So that will be it, and I will go through things in the chat. But I'm looking for Don. He solved all of our mysteries. Now you found all of our missing sculptures.
I'm still hanging. I didn't know. I've on trace where one might have ended up, but well, I'll have to look further.
Well, it's glad to know it's just not me, you know. Let me just flip through here.
The Winston Churchill one I remember looking for a long time. Just gone.
Yeah, NCR, Richard mentioned NCR's computer. NCR actually was interesting. They had it with a number of, they had NCR had it, IBM had it, and over in the United States Pavilion was the first time you could actually sit and use a computer and get an answer. So you could come out and say, what was, what day were you born on? And would tell you what happened on that date in history. One of the pavilions would give you, what's your favorite recipe? And you'd say strawberry shortcake, it would print it out. NCR had a thing that what they were really trying to promote at the time, which being a computer guy, I found fascinating, was they were trying to do a computer with liquid-based logic gates. And their whole idea was that they could have pressure in a tube, and depending on how you change the pressure, it would actuate a switch at the other end of the tube. And I mentioned in one of the books, I have a picture of it about a fluid-based computer. All I could think of was all the problems you have with a solid-state computer with computer bugs and everything. I could just imagine if your computer broke out into leaks. So I cannot imagine a fluid-based computer and what they were attempting to do with it. But yeah, that was a really big thing. I'm glad Richard mentioned it. You never know, again, what particular date changes your life and go in what direction. But to be able to go into the World's Fair and some of them you filled out a form, like I believe IBM, you did OCR and they put it in there and what was your date, and they would matter of fact, it wasn't thought the bubbles, you would write in that you were born in 01/27 and whatever, stick it in, and it would read your handwriting. The fact the computer could read your handwriting was just the coolest thing. And then it would come back and tell you everything that had happened on that date and time. That was the fact that you could tell a computer what to do was so revolutionary for 1964. It was really really a big kick. And I still have a bunch of those printouts from various things that they got. They also there was, besides the you had the you had the computerized pen pal one at NCR, and I'm trying to remember, it was in one of the pavilions. I think it was the Better Living Center. You could fill out a thing and it would rate you on your love quotient, and again you would fill out these bubbles and stick it in there and would read it. So it's lots of computer stuff, that's for sure.
Well, IBM also had the Math and Magic thing or whatever Charles and Ray Eames put together for mathematics that was absolutely superb. And it's, in fact, still there. I was a member of the New York Hall of Science for a couple of years, and the Eames company came up with things that showed the binomial approximation to the norm using little balls that would fall down and branch away, and showed random walks that if you let everything go to chance, you'd probably come back to where you started. They did absolutely fantastic mathematical concepts there.
Yeah, the one thing I remember the ball thing with it coming down the probability curve, because we helped rebuild that for the Tomorrowland movie. We actually built a full-size copy of it, and people would think, oh, it doesn't work. Yeah, try it as often as you want, and it does work. But they also had another one which I believe you can find on YouTube, which was a thing of Sherlock Holmes and Mr. Watson describing logic, and if this is this, then that must be that, and this is that, and it's the whole mechanical thing. And and I was a big Sherlock Holmes fan. I had read all the books and everything, and to see this mechanical Sherlock Holmes discussing things, and Watson, of course, being as obtuse as ever, it was really really well done. And I believe that the whole little video of the Sherlock Holmes thing is on YouTube. But yeah, they had great displays there, like I said, the fact that you could actually use computers, and when you went into the movie for IBM and it was explaining, how they use the computers for deciding where a rail car is going to go in a freight yard, and they had, you know, again, little things that were so new at the time, barcodes in the side of a freight car, and they came in, a camera could read it, and the camera could decide, oh, that car needs to go here, and automatically change the track. I mean, stuff you don't, you know, today so taken for granted. Back then, that was really cool stuff.
A lot of the Eames IBM stuff was duplicated in exhibits in science museums across the US. They had an IBM exhibit in Chicago as well that had many of the features. And one of the things that was in Chicago, and I think was at the World's Fair, that always fascinated me was soap bubbles on different shapes of wire frames.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing, you know, Al, the things that make an impact. I was just reading through here on the number of people that are commenting about restaurant associates and the 94th Aero Squadron restaurants. They were all around the country, and I would say I knew the guy that ran it at the time, and he just a real quick aside. I told Carol, I think it was dinner last night or the night before. I mentioned earlier, he would buy all these planes and he could write them all off in his taxes. A friend of mine became one of his accountants and drove it crazy, trying to keep the guy's personal life and company life and everything. But at one point, he got a B-24 bomber out of India, and B-24s are not all that common. But he had to fly it back to England to get it restored. He basically made it airworthy enough to get it in the air. They could get it to England, but there was no way they could fly it to the United States. But they had to fly along the Indian-Pakistani border, and they were really concerned that the Pakistani Air Force might shoot down this Indian Air Force plane. So they painted one side of it in Pakistani markings and the other side in Indian markings. So they flew up the border. We had the right side on both sides. So it got back here and became so popular because it was painted in the weird colors. He left it that way. He also, I was at Warner Brothers at the time. He rented us the plane that was used for the movie Memphis Belle. And again, this guy was very economical. He didn't put money into things if he didn't have to. We had to restore the plane, get it over to England, and paint it all up in World War II colors and everything. Use it for the movie. He flew it back and he got it to someplace on the East Coast like Georgia. And he ran out of gas money or whatever to get it back to wherever he wanted. So he just left it there. So a year later, you know, we shot the movie, got it all done, and now you edit it and you want to go and put it in the theaters. And I thought, oh, wow, the movie, The Memphis Belle, it'd be great to have the airplane fly around the country and do a barnstorming tour. So, you know, call him up, you know, we'd like you to do this. And he goes, well, the plane needs a lot of work. So he, again, you know, because doing the annual inspection on a B-17 is no easy piece of work. He got Warner Brothers again to pay, oh, and the paint job needs touching up and everything. So he knew how to work both ends to the middle. But Dave Talichet, that was the guy's name. He had an amazing collection of airplanes, and he was a really, really nice guy. But it's just interesting to read through the chat on how many people remember going to some of his restaurants. And yeah, the pandemic pretty much did them all in for good. Excuse me. Jason, yeah, I got your note. Let's talk about Expo 2020. That would be really great. Excuse me. I will hopefully one of these days be done with this this cough for good. But yeah, next week I will probably do some more. Like I just finished these pictures at 12:30 at night last night, or 12:30 this morning. So I didn't get into the next stack, but I was looking at the next pile of them and said, oh, I wish I could show that tomorrow. So well, it's a smaller stack. Oh, that's not. Let's see.
So it's funny that you keep everything in your lake.
Oh, God.
You're pointing to your link.
There's a few left for Nixon. Yeah, you know, one of the things I was doing, I was running the scanner to get all these done. But I'm trying to update my website, you know, which I wrote 150 years ago, and I'm trying to get it all to be user friendly for you know, mobile devices and all that. And one of the things I had to do is for all the CDs that I have, you know, I have thumbnails on them, but I wanted to regenerate larger thumbnails and higher quality, but you don't realize how many pictures you have when you have to do each thumbnail set by set. So I finished last night, I think, with set 550. It was like, oh God. So Wayne's always asking me about doing more CDs, and it's like, I got to do that. But boy, it just, I get so tired of, because you got to go to Photoshop, automate, contact sheet. It just takes forever. So, Rock, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question, and I apologize, there wasn't in last week, so this might have been asked then, or you may have made comment. But I noticed on a certain number of these pictures, there was that discoloration from the tape. Is that transferring through the paper, or is that where the paper was laying against another one and then picked up the tape? Because usually photographic paper is pretty thick, and I have a hard time believing it would transfer through unless that glue is really pretty toxic stuff.
Yeah, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact, we did talk about that. And if anybody would like, I'm holding here, if anybody would like genuine 1964 World's Fair Corporation Scotch tape, yes. It basically does eat through whatever they use, Brock. It was certainly acidic as hell, and it goes right through the picture. One of the things I did was I scanned them basically in color, and I will go through and try to do whatever I can to take that yellow marking that when it basically ate right through the paper from the backside into the front of it. So I have again I've got about 200 of these pictures I just did, and about 180 of them had this thing taped across the back. So one of the things I've done now is pull it off so it will never get any worse. But in most cases, to be honest with you, it fell off. The glue is just gone. It almost always stuck to the paper and the caption paper, and didn't stick to the photo. But yeah, it ate right through it, and that now I'm going to be really. And that's why these take a lot of time to do. To try to go around with the paint tool and the brush tool and everything to try to get some of that out. But it is unfortunate. One batch of the ones that showed last week had also gotten exposed to water, so I have to do a fair amount of cleanup and try to turn back the ravages of time as much as you can. But if Joey was here today, I was going to offer him. I was going to really say I can really hell of a deal on. I mean, this is genuine. Just think Robert Moses may have touched this tape.
Is it brittle or is it brittle or still flexible?
It's amazingly flexible. I mean, I threw out tons of it. This is just from the batch I was doing yesterday. But I mean, yeah, it's just that it's whatever brand of Scotch tape they used, or whatever. Maybe it wasn't Scotch, maybe it was just silicone tape. But whatever it was acidic as hell. So I've now taken all the pictures and scanned them, and I put them into little plastic folders, and I made sure I got non-acidic, and I took out all the tape and everything. So hopefully they won't get any worse than they are. But interesting observation. Yeah, I mean,
well, it was interesting because in some cases you could see where the tape had torn, and so there was half of it was on, of course, the paper below. I mean that it was holding onto the picture, and the other half was through, and so you only had that half going through there. But in other cases where it crossed both of them, it went all the way through the pictures. I mean, through the paper onto the picture too. So it was like, yeah, that's got to be very acidic tape.
Yeah. Oh my God, just ate through my desk. No.
Hey, Bill,
Yeah,
Shelley
hi, Tom.
wrote that, she's building that model and she can show it to us.
Oh,
Can
Rob. Yeah, Rob, you wanted to show us your Pepsi
No,
model?
Shelley, yeah.
Well, if he or she would unmute, I'm more than glad to. Oh, hi there. There you are.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, Rob.
Yeah, how you doing?
Pretty good. Oh, you got a model to show us?
I think so.
You're upside down.
His background's right side up.
Yeah, your virtual background is flipping you upside down. You're standing on your head.
That's how he built it.
But that's not it's not live, so I don't know how to
That's okay.
how do I get rid of the virtual background and show the camera?
If on my particular one, I go over to the video camera on the bottom left-hand side of the screen and tell it, turn off virtual background.
Yeah, video camera, up arrow, video settings.
Now, next week, everybody's gonna want to be standing on their head. It could be worse. We could be, remember the attorney that was giving a remote disposition? He turned himself into a cat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't know how to turn it off.
I'm not a cat, Your Honor.
By the way, while we're all together here, I want to take up a fund. I want everybody to send $5 to Irv so he can buy an ISP that doesn't disconnect him. You must have dropped out 14 times, Irv.
Yeah, I noticed.
Yeah,
Only when you're sharing your screen. When we're on the screen now, it never is a problem.
yeah. Nope, you're still upside down, Rob.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing.
Aren't computers wonderful?
They are.
So,
Yeah,
He's
they work.
upside down and he's missing an arm too.
yeah.
Oh, there's the arm.
I give up.
Okay. Well, hopefully we can see it another point in time. So you're doing a whole Pepsi model right now, or your little pieces of the Tower of the Four Winds going to revolve?
No, well, there's no revolving, but it's the whole pavilion, 1/600 scale for a client. And
Wow.
I'm about 75% done.
Uh-huh. How long does
So-
something like that take you?
Well, it depends. Probably a month, 4 to 6 weeks, if I work on it pretty steady.
If there's anybody that didn't see it already, Rob gave a talk on his model making, which is in the archives on my YouTube channel, which is really phenomenal. I'm very pleased to have one of his New York State Pavilion models here at my house, and it does absolutely outstanding work. So if there's anything from the World's Fair that you would like to have sitting that you could look across your office and stare at it, I'm sure he would be more than willing to take on a commission for you. And again, I don't know how you have the patience to do the itty bitty little details that you do, but on a scale 1 to 5, they're all 10s. I mean, they really are.
Well, thank you, Bill. That's very kind of you. And it basically keeps me out of trouble, I think. I don't.
It's interesting. My son is really into Studio Ghibli, and he had a movie that he really liked, Howl's Moving Castle. So I happened to see, when trying to find something for Christmas, a book about how you can make Howl's Moving Castle out of paper, the same sort of stuff you do, Rob. So we bought him this book, and it's incredibly intricate, and he's gone through, I don't know how many X-Acto knives already, just cutting out the pieces and forming them and gluing them together and everything. So I hope you have a good discount on X-Acto knives, because you must go through a hell lot of them.
Yeah, I do. That is one of the mostly used tools. Using styrene plastic and cardstock, and I take a lot of photographs, a lot of your photographs, and scale them to the size of the building. So it's a lot of fun, and it's kind of a way that I go back in time and relive a lot of the memories that I had in each of these places. So it's like watching one of your presentations. And when the Pepsi Pavilion came up, I thought, well, yeah, that's all the inspiration I need. So
Well, it's hey, it's like that's the same thing with me with restoring the photos. I'll spend the time working on the photos, and I don't find myself thinking about politics or other odds and ends. Just I'm back in 1964. I'm 12 years old, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to scrape up enough money to buy a waffle. And it certainly is escapism, but I make no apology for it. And like I said, I also just enjoy finding new stuff. I mean, you get a picture and you look at it and you go, I never knew that before. And it's just, that's the kind of thing that's kind of fun, that just the really weird esoteric stuff that shows up.
Yeah.
This presentation I'm going to be doing down in Anaheim, I think it's February 19th. We're going to be talking about Disney and the World's Fair connections, and the one guy that's put a bunch of stuff together. When you have three different people talking, we're doing a run through to make sure I don't say the exact same thing he did, and he's not going to say the same thing somebody else does. But you think you have all sorts of stuff, and like there's I mentioned before how they had offered, Disney had offered to do a show for Coca-Cola for the fair, and it was going to be a dinner show, basically based, a Polynesian dinner show, and Coke said no, and they did what they did. Well, I have some pictures of it, and now this guy comes up with other pictures of it. So when he's doing his run through the other night, I'm just sitting there, wow. I mean, it's just really neat to see other stuff you haven't seen before. He's another ex-Imagineer, and as he was saying, now he laments he doesn't have access to the collection anymore. But some great concept art of things that they were hoping to do. So I'm looking forward to. The trouble is his presentation would go about 2 hours. Mine would go an hour. The other guy would go an hour, and we have 90 minutes to do the whole thing, including a Q&A with Bob Gurr. So it's like, trying to cut the thing down, cut it down. And, you have to look at it at some point and say, oh, which of my children do I like best? Which is cut. So.
I've been enjoy watching you on the Disney Channel, Bill.
Oh, yeah, it's I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I don't think you were here, that they have a thing at Walt's Barn at the Griffith Park. Matter of fact, there's one tomorrow, but I think it's going to get rained out. And we were down there watching a friend of ours perform, and this kid came and tugged on my arm and said, "Are you Bill Cotter?" And I said, "Yeah, how did you know that?" And he goes, "Oh, I watch you on TV." And made my day. I think my kids almost come back down to normal size. So yeah, and I had just somebody the other day, somebody, "Oh my God, I never realized all this time you're that Bill Cotter." And I go, my kids don't think it's real exciting. So
Bill,
yeah.
I did have another couple of comments. When they were talking about, or you were talking about the Tower of Light, or what was it? Tower of Light? Yeah, Pavilion, and whether it was a problem for the approach to the airport and stuff. I don't know how many people in the audience here are aware of the Rams and Chargers new stadium called SoFi Stadium that was built here in Los Angeles. But an interesting story about that, it's directly under the flight path into LAX. And if you've seen any artist renderings or even photographs of the building, it's a very low profile stadium compared to when you see it from the inside, where it's the big high walled stadium, the deep seating and that. And they ended up they didn't build it into the ground because they wanted to make it a low profile building. That just became what it was. They built it into the ground, down, over, I think 2/3 of it are buried down in the ground, because the cranes they would have had to have used to build it above ground would have put it into the approach envelope, safety envelope for the airport. So that's something they had to take into consideration when they built it. And so it's kind of fascinating. I watched a special they did about the construction of it. It is an interesting structure, but I just, the things you don't think about, it's like, oh yeah, that's going to be an approach right into LAX. So you can't, it's not that the building would have been too tall, but the cranes to build the building would have been too tall. So
that's interesting.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mention things like that. When I was looking at the pictures of the Underground World Home, and they had the piano in there, I was thinking, how did the hell they get the piano down into that thing? And I think they probably put it in there and then put the roof on the building. But it would be hell to ever get some of these things back out. And every now and then you hear about, I went through my son's apartment. We moved him out of his apartment 2 weeks ago. And we knew this couch got up the stairs into the place, and the guys could not figure out how to get the couch down and take it back out. And they were going crazy because these guys were really, really good. They did a great job, but they're trying to figure out, it came up here. How did it come up here? And they asked, did you bring it in through a window? And I said, no. And I said, oh, okay. And that they were actually at that point getting ready to take the window out and lower the couch down. They said, you don't need to worry. We actually lowered a couch out of somebody's window in a 6-story building, and she videotaped the whole thing. And I said, hey, you take that couch out of here. I'm going to be videotaping it. But they finally figured out how to get it. But you don't stop. Carol will know the story. She's on the phone, so she won't hear it. But I went out and I bought some bookcases, and I had a bedroom that I wanted to put them in, and measured the wall they fit in and everything. And I went off and bought the bookcases. They got here and turned out they will not turn around the way our stairwell is developed to go upstairs. So rather than whatever the bookcase was, this big and that big, and I had to get 3 of them, that could go up. And in my neighborhood, I can guarantee you, nobody in my neighborhood has a king-size bed, unless the neighbors down the street actually had to take their window out and bring the bed in through the window, because you cannot get a full-size mattress. That's just the way they design the house. But I never would have thought about your crane that way. That the crane's going to be too tall for the building. Well, it's like you can relate to this, Brock, the Haunted Mansion, right? The pane of glass with for the people that know what the Haunted Mansion uses a pane of glass for the dancing scene with the ghost. And the one at Disneyland has a very elaborate spider web that goes across it. Because an asshole kid came in with a slingshot and let loose at the pane of glass. Well, luckily the pane of glass didn't collapse. It broke. But the way the building was built, the glass was put in, the roof was put on. There was no way to get that glass back out of the building. So learn that lesson. So Florida is slightly different. So
Bill, where in Anaheim is your talk going to be?
it's at the Anaheim Hotel, which is located directly across the Harbor Boulevard from the main entrance to Disneyland. And it's on, let me just look at a calendar real quick. I'm 100% right. It is on a Friday. So it looks like it must be the 16th, because that's a Friday. Friday the 16th, I believe. I'll find you the details. It's done by hang on here 1 second. See if I can find it. Let's see. I have so much crap here on the computer. Just 1 second.
Well, while you're looking, I was just going to mention, I imagine a lot of you have been to Amsterdam, and I always thought it was kind of funny how the tops of the buildings were always leaning forward, and that, like what had happened if it was an earthquake or, or the building settling or whatever. And then, I found out that they built them all that way just for the sole purpose of, hoisting up furniture to the top floor and bringing it in the front window of the building.
Yeah. I noticed they had all the cranes on when I was over there. Not cranes, but hooks and pulleys up there
block and tackle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I'm trying to get the date here. Yeah, it's on so many of them. So let's see. What they're having is an event called the Gunball Rally at the park the following Saturday, and I'm looking at their website. You'd think they would have the date here immediately available, but I'm pretty sure it must be the 16th. I'm terrible on dates, and I got to write things down. But I'll find it to you, and I'll send it to you, Randy. I think Kathy was on, but she's off now. Yeah, even their website, they haven't updated their calendar here. But
February 2nd, maybe, Bill?
What's that?
Friday, February 2nd, maybe?
I don't think so.
David Koenig made a post about.
Okay, is it February 2nd? Oh God, that's coming up. I better be ready for it.
I'm not sure if that's when it's moderated by Bob Gurr, Bill Carter, Chris Merritt.
February 2nd. Okay. Let's see. Wow, that's only in 2 weeks. So I better get ready. No, I'm actually ready for it. I just have to again decide which of my children I like better and cut the talk down. But if you are in the area, again, I don't make any money if you go or don't go. But the fellow Chris Merritt that's put together a good portion of the presentation, come up with some really neat stuff. So we've just got to. We were trying to convince him when I run through the other day to go and execute some of his kids. So we're going to do another run through this week. But February.
What time of the day?
It starts at 7 o'clock at night.
Oh, that's good, 'cause I have something going on that morning if it is the second. Yeah.
Yeah, 7 o'clock, starts at 7 that night at the Anaheim Hotel. And Bob Gurr is going to be there. And if you've ever, well, if some of you know Bob, if it moved on wheels at Disney, Bob was the guy that came behind it. The Main Street vehicles, the Autopia cars, the monorail, that sort of stuff. But Bob and I did a panel at the Destination D23 thing in, Florida. And he has some really great stories to talk about the building of the Disney shows there at the fair. So I'm going to try to, elicit some of those hiccups, elicit some of those out of them. So if you're able to make it, that'd be great. Anybody else in the Anaheim area? So, well, again, I hope everybody's doing okay weather-wise, that the blizzards are not being too terrible. And, we're getting rain out here today, which is nice because we've certainly needed it. And it's going to be raining all weekend if they say it's right. And that will make the little stream outside our house flow again. Oh, it's still flowing, but it'll flow more. So look forward to it. So Jason, I'll be in touch. Let me make a note here before I forget. February 2nd, go to Anaheim and call Jason. Great. And again, next week I will have more of these things, including the World of Food, the pavilion that almost got halfway built and then torn back down, and some other odds and ends to hopefully make life interesting. And hope everybody's doing well, and we'll see you next Saturday.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Thank you
bye.
so much.